prices that don't really justify the parts.
So the value isn't there. Because of all of this, you need to kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah, I would slightly disagree.
Okay.
Like, oh my god, this is awesome. This video is brought to you by SVS.
SVS.
That whisper. Welcome to the One Bit Podcast. So this is where we talk with Sean, who is my co-host. And we kind of teased him in the first episode. If you guys go back to the first episode, he was there making fun of me and me making fun of him. But yeah, for those of you that don't know, Sean, he runs a channel called Zero Fidelity. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Sean. Say hi.
Hi. So I'm a guy with a ball cap. I used to review a lot of hi-fi equipment, but now I am joining this effort with Jay to where we basically team together once in a while. And we're going to talk about various subjects relating to hi-fi. And occasionally we're going to review products together. And that is going to be the summation of the One Bit Podcast.
Sounds good. So
I got to mention, occasionally we'll have guests.
Yeah, and we'll have guests and, review things together from time to time. Just have fun. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about, do you get more when you spend more money in hi-fi, right? And we're going to go over some of the kind of takeaways and some tips and tricks on to how to maximize your return when you spend money in hi-fi. So yeah, Sean, why don't you take it away? What's your snapshot, kind of opinion? Do you think that you get more when you spend more in hi-fi?
It's a complex answer, but the short answer is you tend to get more stuff in terms of materials, and you get the opportunity to experience better sound, but it's by no means a guarantee. And this isn't something that you can just throw money at. So that is going to be my snapshot opinion. What about yours?
Yeah, I would generally say it depends on the category of things, but you do get more build quality, sound quality, certain aspects of the product. You do get an improvement when you spend more. Again, like Sean said, it's not a guarantee. And, we'll talk about the frustrating part of that in the later part of this video and how to kind of navigate through that and what we learned through, testing multiple products that we come in here. But yeah, I would say, generally speaking, if you play your cards right, you do get more for your money.
For sure. And I think there's a lot of categories that we're going to use to break this down. And the first one is going to be, what should somebody expect when they pay more money, particularly in terms of build quality, features? What about exclusivity and service? What do you think people get? Let's start off with build quality. What's your opinion on that, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, whenever I buy anything, right? I expect better build quality, better quality in what it does.
Yep.
And so first and foremost, with build quality, I do believe that you get more. Now, is it, twice more build quality when you spend twice the money? No, I don't think so. I think that's generally, depending on the company. And if the company emphasizes their build quality and aesthetics and stuff like that.
I'd agree with that.
So for example, it compares brand to brand too, right? So for example, Sonos Faber, I love Sonos Faber build quality and aesthetics. They're just gorgeous Italian craftsmanship. Compare that to Focal. Around the same price
point. What did Focal do to you?
Right? Sorry, what was that?
I said, what did Focal do to you? No, go on.
No. Really, any speaker. But you compare it in the same kind of price category. I think that Sonos Faber speakers are more aesthetically pleasing. Arguably even better built. Better quality materials, I think. And so, yeah, it's kind of differ in level of build quality from brand to brand, even if you're spending the same amount of money. But generally speaking, within the same lineup or the same brand, as you move up in the ladder of their lineup, so you go higher end, you should expect better build quality. I mean, downgrading, build quality is for their higher lineup would be a big mistake a company can make. Unlike our sponsor of this video, SVS. So as you know, SVS had their prime line of speakers for a while, and it's honestly a good bang for your buck. Like, a lot of home theater enthusiasts love it, but there's absolutely no question that their new line of speakers, the Ultra Evolution, which I have the tower speakers in for review right now, and the fit and finish, the cabinetry down to the crossover and the driver design, the performance envelope and all that kind of stuff, definitely is a huge upgrade. So as you move up in the line of a certain brand like SVS, you can definitely expect more in build quality, and that's something that you can expect in virtually almost all brands. You know,
Yeah.
you spend
Yeah.
more, you're going to get more build quality.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think the expectation, when you're buying products is, well, nowadays you can get actually pretty solid build quality for not a lot of money, but there's still going to be differences, right? As you go from a $500 speaker to, say, a $1,500 speaker, you go from a solid MDF box to maybe even more inert cabinet, something a little, less resonant. And then you'll go from a vinyl finish to a real wood finish. And then as you spend more money, you get fancy wood. And then you may even get high gloss finish. You get more, exotic crossover components. The drivers are more expensive. So typically with speakers, again, when it comes to just the kind of stuff you get, you pay more, you tend to get more stuff. Now, there is going to be exceptions to the rule from time to time. An example that I like to use in the $2,500-ish price range is the KEF R3 Meta and the Picard S400. Both speakers are celebrated for giving you really good performance for your money, but they're very different. Because from the outside looking in, the KEF R3 Meta is a far better built speaker because in many respects the cabinet is. It's much heavier, much better braced. The fit and finish is going to be just on a completely different level from the Picard for basically the same amount of money. But the difference here is that when you look inside of the speakers, the quality of the crossover components in the KEF R3 Meta are extremely budget, whereas that's where Picard put most of their money. Their crossover is ridiculously expensive for something in their price range, but that comes at the compromise of fit and finish and the overall cabinetry. But overall, when it comes to speakers, you tend to get more stuff. And the same can hold true for amplifiers. You get bigger transformers, heat sinks, so on and so forth.
Better
So I think we're on the
cars.
same page there.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So what about features though?
Oh God. I knew you were gonna ask that, but
Yeah, this is your
always
ballywick here.
painful.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's always painful because honestly, in terms of features in hi-fi, I don't think you get more necessarily when you
I'd agree
spend.
with that. Yeah.
In fact, actually, I think you get less when you spend more in some categories.
It does tend to
Right?
get more narrow, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give an example like streamers. I
Hmm.
think that's a prime example right there. When you spend more, you don't necessarily get more features. You actually lose features, and that's
Hmm.
one of the frustrations I have with streamers, especially high end. And I get it. It's like these streamer companies, the high end ones at the very least, have a very strict kind of belief on some kind of specific technology or core
Hmm.
belief. So
Hmm.
they go, for example, a render, they like to use Tidal,
Yeah.
and that's a streamer I use because I'm a Tidal user. So they really focus on hone in that kind of sound quality aspect using Tidal.
Hmm.
So that means no Spotify, even if I want to. So you lose a lot of flexibility. Whereas you look at Ever Solo, for example, with the DMP-A6, that
Yeah,
streamer is
they're
like,
loaded.
yeah, it's like what 1/12 the price of the render.
Hmm.
Yet it's like fully loaded, has all the inputs and outputs you would want. DSP now, PQ, a lot of flexibility and just customizability and features. So yeah, I would say, for hi-fi, when you're looking at features, yeah, throwing money at it isn't the answer. You're not necessarily gonna get more. In
Yeah.
fact, you might actually get less.
I would say I agree with that. I mean, how many integrated amplifiers and receivers do we see for less than $1,000 that have just about everything you could ever need? How many powered speakers do we see that have built-in Bluetooth, built-in DACs, and all these other different features? I think the main difference is, and I wouldn't say this is factually true in all cases, but typically the features are of higher quality when you spend more money, or at least that's what you should expect to get, right? You look at the DAC chips, and then as you go up the line, you should get better DAC chips. And I also think there are certain product lines, more to your point with speakers, to where as you move up that company's line, typically you can get higher quality features, maybe not more of them, but that's kind of the
Yeah, like
trade.
more specialized, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I think with features, yeah, that's one of those exceptions that's kind of frustrating, isn't it? Like, ironically enough, the less expensive gear
It
has
is.
more options.
It is, but as long as you know what you want. For example, I'm a
Yeah.
Tidal user. I said it again. That's why I use a render because it sounds really good with Tidal and etc. So as long as you know what you want, I think a lot of times you're kind of trading features for other aspects like build quality and sound quality. Like
Mm-hmm.
high-end streamers, yeah, they sound definitely better to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's like choose your poison. Do you want a lot of features, or do you want a specific, um, you know, feature set that's more advanced, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really depends. Like the render has like these kind of special features where you can turn off all the display and stuff and make sure the power supply is only focusing on sound quality. Like
Yep.
that doesn't exist in the Ever Solo.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things, a lot of things that you trade for feature. And a company has to make their choice, right? They spend money on the features or the build quality or the sound quality. So if
Yep.
the chances are, if you have a lot of features, then their first priority isn't honing on in one specific area, right?
Yeah, and and this is something we're going to touch on in a separate video, but it's basically a matter of this. You're building something to a certain price point. If you're a company, you only have so much money to spend. And in order to pull from your budget to put towards features, then you have to take away from the components that go to sound quality. So you really got to kind of make a choice. And depending on what kind of a company you are, try to find a healthy balance. So with features, the answer is, you actually don't get more when you spend more, but the features that you do get with the components should be better. So what about exclusivity though? What's your take on that? We're talking about limited production models.
Yeah, like I said, I get it.
Mhm.
If you really like something, if you really like a brand, for example, then you might want some, one-off special finish,
Mhm.
limited runs, and so on. And I'm happy with that. You're just gonna pay a very much a premium for that kind of exclusivity, right?
So you're talking about like the same circuit or the same exact product. They just threw
Yeah,
some
I mean,
fancy stuff
sometimes they'll
at it.
throw in like,
Yeah.
better capacitors and a little bit of, bling here and there, like Macintosh comes to mind, right? Anniversary versions.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but at the end of the day, those upgrades don't really justify the price. Usually these exclusive versions have, you know, prices that don't really justify the parts,
So the
right?
value isn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I get it because like for me, like when I really love a component, right? Like
Mhm.
I did this with the HD audience as an example.
Mhm.
I had the Chrome version. Now the Chrome version was really shiny. I liked it, but it was hard to film and it wasn't exactly to my taste. So I asked Alberto from AGD if he can make me a special version. I was like, please, I love this amplifier. Give me a special and so I did this like unique copper kind of finish on
Mhm.
black, and I really, really love it. So I
Yeah.
get it. If you like something, and of course, there's additional cost to that.
Yeah.
It's not a finish that they offer readily. I have to absorb the cost of something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're gonna pay a premium, but if it's something that you really love and it's something that you're gonna have for a very long time, and you want it in a specific customized finish, yeah, I get it. I think there's definitely people that will pay a premium for that. Um, but yeah, in terms of getting more, I don't know. You don't necessarily gain
Yeah.
any performance.
I think we're on the same page there, especially when it comes to a company that takes what already exists and just makes it fancy, right? In one way, shape, or form. I do think there are products, though, that are designed from the ground up that they make sense. I don't know if I'd say you get more, but it makes sense. Like Dyne Audio with the Heritage Special and
Mhm.
that whole line. I was like, that makes sense, especially at the time when they released it. It really was sandwiched quite intelligently between Contour and Confidence. And when you listen to them, it's like, this makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
it's expensive because it's exclusive and the value proposition is going to be more subjective, but in those scenarios, to me, that makes a little more sense. And it also makes sense when it comes to companies, very small hi-fi companies that are of more, they offer more bespoke products. That is their business model, like the Pearl Sibelius, right? A lot of what you're paying for is the materials that they use are of super highly premium materials. They discard most of the materials that they end up buying. And then the way it's assembled, and basically they do things almost the most expensive way humanly possible. Now, to a lot of people, there's no value in that, but there's other people out there who would love that. It's like, dude, this is something that's going to last my entire life. That'll probably last my kids' entire life. And if they like the sound and build of the product, then to them it's worth the money. But make no mistake, you pay for that exclusivity, that build. You place your order, they have to build it for you. And
Yeah.
again, I don't know if it gets you more in terms of value, like in that traditional sense, but you are getting something there. And one of the things that you get is you get access to the people who made the product. And that kind of leads me to the last bit, which is service. And, I think when it comes to value and you pay more and get more with service, I think the overwhelming answer is in 2025, not really. But I know you have some strong opinions about this. So I'll let you share what you think.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a strong opinion per se. Um, but yeah, no, I think that like the definition of white glove service, as you know, I've worked at a dealership.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the one that offered that kind of white glove service, bring it to your space, set it up for you professionally and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the customer or the client doesn't have to even lift a finger. So if you appreciate that kind of service, absolutely. But you're gonna be paying for that service, obviously, right? It's built
Yeah.
into the margins and so on. So at any point, if you're asking for a pretty steep discount from a dealership, really any dealership, you're probably not gonna get that white glove service. You're
No,
gonna end up probably,
you can
putting
carry
it
it
in
out the door
trunk.
yourself.
Right, you're gonna carry it yourself.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to the white glove service of 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of brands like Arendal, SVS, Emotiva, a lot of dealers like Audiophile, Crutchfield that have very strong in-home demos and return
Yeah,
services.
just about everybody has that now. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's risk-free, meaning like a lot of these times, these companies will pay even shipping back and
Yeah.
forth. So you get the comfort of sitting in your luxury home, or your home. In
Luxury.
my case, luxury. I don't know, but my place,
I was about to say, where's this luxury home? I need it.
not mine, but in someone's luxury home, you get to
Yeah.
set it up, enjoy it for, in case of a rental, which I think is a leader in that regard, 60 days. That's 2 months.
Yeah.
Um, Unheard of. Like you didn't get this kind of white glove service before.
Yeah.
And then you have the option to return it if you don't like it for whatever reason, and you have that choice within 2 months,
Yeah.
which is uh, ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of like the new white glove service
And
for
that's not
me.
exclusive to price. I mean, that could be with products that cost literally $100.
Exactly. And so unless you're like really like someone that's super busy, and there are people like that. I set up a system for people that had really important jobs they're very busy. I never even got to see them. I just go into their home and I
Yeah.
get access, and I set it up in their place, and write down instructions, and there you go. So I've had installations like that plenty of times. So I see value in that as well. If you need professionals or people that need that need professionals to do it for them because they just don't have the time to research and do all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think the only times when you spend more money, you get better service are under two circumstances. And the first is what you already opened it up with, right? Which is if you buy from a dealer and you're not getting steep discounts, once you spend beyond a certain amount of money, you basically get to the point where you don't have to do anything. You just go to the dealer, listen, pick out what you want, and they handle the rest. They'll take out your old gear, they'll sell your old gear for you, they'll install your new system, they'll tune it for you to your liking. When it comes time to change components, they will bring those components to your house so you can listen for yourself to see what you like. And I noticed because I've been a part of a few dealer rides who did exactly this service. But you do need to spend a decent amount of money and find value in that. And the only other time is, I think, when you buy into certain brands like AccuPhase, for example, part of what you're paying for is the fact that this company manufactures things in a way to where 20 years down the line, when you need to service that amp or whatever you bought from them, there is a 90% chance they're going to have those parts available and they're going to be to spec. And you have to pay for that because that's a lot of money that they have invested in an inventory that's just sitting there, not making them money. So there are times to where you do pay more and you get more in that sense. But by and large, I think we agree service isn't for most people. It's not going to, spending more money is not going to get you anything better.
Yeah,
Especially
it
if you're
depends
buying
on
in
the
bulk.
kind of service you want, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So in general, when you spend more money, I think we'd both agree when it comes to stuff that you get, you tend to get more, especially with like speakers and whatnot. Features, kind of the reverse is true a lot of the times when it comes to quantity of
It's
features.
very frustrating.
Yeah, exclusivity, you definitely pay for that. Whether or not it brings value to you is going to be more subjective, but you definitely have to pay for it. And service, unless you're one of those people that need the white glove service, probably not. So here's
And
the
it
big,
depends brand from brand too, right?
yeah, yeah.
So
It does. It does vary from brand to brand. But here's the big question that I think people really want to know, which is, does paying more guarantee better sound quality? What's your experience been like?
Yeah, well, I would say that it doesn't guarantee um, a jump in sound quality, right? So
Hmm.
it guarantees a jump in sound quality when you spend more money when you know what you're doing with it,
Yep.
right?
Agree.
So same thing goes for anything that people buy, whether it's
Hmm.
cameras, computers. Like I went to LA uh, 2 years ago,
Hmm.
and since I live in Canada, there's no point in like driving a Corvette or Ferrari. You'll just get stuck in the snow. So I
Yeah.
was in LA in California for the first time 2 years ago, visiting Samsung and their audio lab. And I was like having a blast. I had some downtime, and I was like, I'm gonna rent a car. So I rented a Corvette C8.
C8. I remember that, the red
Uh,
one.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh my god, this is awesome. And yeah, I drove it like a grandmother, right? My girlfriend was like, floor it, floor it, floor it. And I was like, I
Drove it
was
like a
like,
Sienna minivan,
there's a speed
basically.
limit. There's a speed limit. Look, 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 I'm going as fast as I can. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you give me a car like that, I'm not a car person. I drive a Honda here in Canada,
Yeah.
in a more of a work car. So for me, I'm not really a car enthusiast. So if you give me an expensive car or a supercar, I'm not gonna know what to do with it. I'm gonna drive like
Paying
a
more
regular.
wouldn't necessarily get you better for
Yeah,
you.
and it's the
Yeah.
same way for cameras, and it's the same way for speakers and
Mhm.
hi-fi as well. Up to a certain point, when you get to a certain level, you need to know how to set up the speakers correctly. You need to know your gear. You need to know how the synergy works within the system, right?
Mhm.
Amplifier pairing, impedance matching, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely even subwoofer setup, right, can be very elaborate, and there are people that make a living off just setting up subwoofers correctly for you, right?
Yep.
So, if it wasn't that important, then it wouldn't be a job. So, it's a real thing, calibration of a system and so on. So if you don't know that, and if don't want to spend time with it, I would say consult a professional for it. But
Mhm.
yeah, at the end of the day, you need to know what to do with it. And yeah, that's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, obviously, with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I think one of the frustrating things about audio that trips up a lot of audiophiles is it's not like a lot of other industries to where when you spend more money, you can at least objectively say you're getting better. Like even with your Corvette that you were driving, I mean, if I threw you in a Toyota Corolla and then I threw you in a C8, it's like no, you're getting the faster car, even though you're driving it like a grandmother. You're getting the faster car. And when it comes to like building a computer, when if you know what you're doing, you spend more money, you're going to get better performance, and most people, it tracks with the real world experience, right? So with hi-fi though, that doesn't necessarily work out that way. I mean, I think there comes a point, and in my experience is probably around as a 2025 to 2500 US dollar price point, to where this is when you cross the threshold between gear that's very easy to use. In other words, you don't really have to know what you're doing. You buy the speakers, you buy the amps, you put it in your room, you're going to get good sound. But once you cross that threshold, now we're getting into more resolving gear, more esoteric territory, to where the products become a little bit more narrow in what they do well and what they don't do well. And because of all of this, you need to kind of know what you're doing. And the only hobby that I know of that's kind of similar is photography. This is something you and I have spoken about before, to where there have been YouTube channels that will take a professional photographer, they will give them an iPhone or some cheap camera, and then they'll give the complete newbie a $20,000 or $30,000 camera system. And they'll say, go out there, take photos, and we'll pick who, takes the best photos. And every single time, the professional not only wins, but wipes the floor with the amateur. Now, does that mean that the expensive camera gear is useless and nobody should ever buy it? No, it's actually fantastic. That's why professionals use it. But you have to be a professional in order to take advantage of what that gear can do. Hi-fi is very much, in my experience, the same exact way. So I think paying more gives you the opportunity to get better sound. But unless you know what you're doing, you could easily get yourself into a situation where you're spending a lot of money on something you enjoy less than the affordable stuff.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
slightly disagree,
Okay.
especially on the point that
Mm-hmm.
$2,500 price point or whatnot
That's
and
fair.
below,
Yeah.
because it's just like the camera analogy. I think the channel you're talking about is Full Time Filmmaker, and I
A few of
encourage
them done
people
it. You
to.
have,
I'll
yeah.
link some of their videos in the description. Um, but basically, it's like the professional gets like a $500 camera rig or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
the amateur gets like a quadrillion-dollar rig to play
Mm-hmm.
with. And of course, the professional knows exactly the camera angles and what to do with it, and really, milks out that $500 camera, right?
Yeah.
I think in a similar way with hi-fi, if you get a $2,500 speaker, let's say the Bacardi S400 Mark II,
Mm-hmm.
it can vary immensely in performance from someone that knows what they're doing versus someone that doesn't, right? So to get the best bang for your buck would be to know exactly how to set that speaker up, know the speakers, what gear goes well with it. And I think all that kind of plays into effect. And then if you really, and to that point of once you go up in that range, you get more
Mm-hmm.
selective, kind of like honed in, not master of all, but master of specific things, right?
Yeah.
Um, let's say you really like imaging on the Bacardi S400 Mark II. And you're like, you know what? I really love the imaging capability. I'm going to find a better imaging loudspeaker,
Yeah.
and then you might go up there. But if you don't know how to set up the speakers for great imaging, towing, right? You're not gonna get that experience to the fullest degree. So
Yeah. I mean, to a
yeah.
degree, I see where you're coming from,
Yeah.
and to a
So
sense degree,
my
agree.
argument is that I think that
Yeah.
regardless of the price point, experience will help.
I agree with that. I think it helps. I think the S400 Mark II is a bad example though, because it's literally designed, place it against a wall, hook it up to whatever, and it's going to be consistent. It's not exactly the most resolving thing in the world.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
only thing
easier.
I'll
It's
disagree
easier.
with.
It's
That's the
easier.
reason why people like it so much.
Yeah, it's easier, right? So
It is, but I get the overriding point that yes, even the budget gear, if you know what you're doing, you're going to get even better sound. I guess my point is that you don't need to know what you're doing to get satisfying sound. Whereas with the more expensive gear, you actually do. At that point, you need to know what you're doing, or else it could be a disaster, and you're going to feel like you just wasted your money and your time. But anyways, so overall, then I guess what we're trying to say here is spending more money doesn't really guarantee better sound quality, right? It gives you the chance to. And if you know what you're doing, then yes, actually, you should be able to get better sound quality. But if you don't, it's kind of up in the air.
yeah, unless you have like literally,
An
just
advisor or somebody.
yeah, some
Yeah.
ridiculous amount of money to where you can just hire a dealership, don't care about the money, you
Yeah.
know. Unless that, yeah, throwing money at hi-fi isn't gonna guarantee a performance increase. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of leads us to like what are some of the advice we have for finding the sweet spot, right? The diminishing return aspect.
Okay.
Um, and for me, it's like, like I've talked about this before, like budget speakers and budget gear have gone like so good, both
Mm-hmm.
in build quality and performance. It's gone to a scary level where diminishing return hits as early as like $500 for a pair of speakers, right?
Sure.
Like it's really hard to justify. Like even a lot of my friends own like $500 speakers, and they're very satisfied with it. Like
Yeah.
my age group, right?
That's where the
Um,
overwhelming majority of audio buyers are, is in that category.
Yeah, and it's really hard to justify going up to like $2,500 price point, spending 5 times more because it is clearly better, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the Bacardi S400 Mark II is clearly better than the ELAC Unified reference. But when you compare build quality side by side or even the sound quality side by side,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's clearly better, but is it 5 times better? Is it justify 5 times the price point? That's where it gets a little bit hard for
You need to
people
have the
to
money and the
justify.
passion and the ear for it, kind of deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So my main advice is really to set your priorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this before. Small kind of change in sound can be a big, change in sound for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on, if you're how much you're invested into this hobby, I guess, right? For the lack of better words, like camera or even graphics card is a good example because I just built a computer, right? Like when people play games, like I have friends who's heavily into games and they'll change their graphics card, spend like 5 times more than what their initial
Yeah.
budget was. And let's say like $5,000 for a graphics card, right? Top
Yeah.
of the line. And then they will see like a 10% increase in performance, like going from 300, 200 FPS to like 300 FPS or something like that, right? And
Yep.
for me, I'm like, really, you spent that much money for a gain in 10% performance? That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But they notice a difference. They're like, "Oh, look how smooth this game is," like whatever, like less
Yeah. No, for
raindrops
sure.
and all these kind of stuff. And in similar ways, what may be a small difference to me is a big difference for them. And same goes the other way. What I notice in audio, because I'm really heavily into this, maybe a small difference for someone else, but for me, it's a big difference, right? So
Yeah.
that's my priority, right? Sound aspect.
Okay. Yeah.
But
I think it's fair.
it could be for someone else, build aspect. It could be, absolutely getting the lowest cost for the dollar, and that might be something like DIY kits for you.
Yeah.
Maybe warranty and service is very important to you. So I would say out of the things that we talked about, build quality, sound quality, service, exclusivity, and all these factors, I would say write down on a piece of paper and then go from the most important to the least important for you.
It's good
And
advice. Yeah.
yeah, and then
I actually have something to look at.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
actually have realistic expectations. You're not gonna
Yeah.
get all of it.
Yeah.
If you're getting a product that hits all of those points, right, all of the priorities that you have from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, whatever the priority, you're gonna end up spending a lot more than you initially expect. Even if there is even a product like that, right? Even if you go to the ridiculous price range, I don't know if it
I mean,
hits
there's
all the
no such thing
priorities.
as perfection, number one. You need to
Yeah.
accept that. But number
So
two, yeah, if you're saying, hey, I want an amplifier, it needs to be 200 watts per channel, but it needs these features, and I want it to be made in Japan, and I want it to be,
and monoblock.
it's exclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my advice. Do you have any advice, Sean, for people that want to maximize their spending?
Well, it sounds like we're, kind of talking about the point of diminishing returns and maximizing investment at the same time. So first, also when it comes to maximizing the investment, I think you lay down actually a bunch of really good suggestions. I really like the list, just writing down what's important to you and looking at it. I think that's so important. I think when it comes to advice, look, a lot of it is about discovery. And what that means is if you're lucky enough to live next to a bunch of dealers, get off your butt and go listen to as much as you possibly can to formulate what it is that you like and don't like. And then if you're somebody who you're not fortunate enough to live next to a bunch of dealers, you have to listen to reviewers like us to narrow down what you should buy and what you shouldn't buy. Then what I would say then is if you're going to buy a product that's new, buy from a company that offers some kind of a generous return policy. Number one, that way it's about as risk-free as possible. You might have to pay for return shipping, but think of it like the cost of gaining experience. But this is a good way to figure out, okay, do I like a bright sound or do I like a warm sound, right? It just really helps you to narrow things down. And then beyond that, I would say don't discount buying used gear if you're comfortable with buying used gear because you get to save a lot of money, right? And there are times, and I think the Hagel 390 is a great example, to where they just released the 400. It's a great integrated amp, but it's very expensive. You can, for a lot less money, like $3,000-$4,000 in savings, go with the recently outgoing 390, which is pretty much 90. What would you say? 90% is good. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I would
It's a
say
little
so.
different,
But at the same
but
time,
yeah,
I think look, the example you're giving falls
yeah,
right into like the writing down of priorities as well. Like in
yeah,
case of
yeah.
buying used, which I've personally done,
That's how I cut
earlier
my
in my
teeth,
job,
man. That's how I
yeah,
got most of my
all the
experience
time.
early on. Yeah,
But you're taking a big risk in service and warranty. So
yeah.
that
The
means,
warranty goes away.
yeah, that means if you're buying used, value is at the top priority for you,
Yeah.
and the service and warranty aspect is at the very bottom, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
again, you can see how that plays out, and writing down your priorities can really lead you to kind of focusing on what you want out of this experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of it is, like I said, it just goes back to discovery. You have to get your ears on products and usually a number of products to just kind of figure it out. Or, maybe you're the lucky person who you buy it one time and you love it, and that's wonderful. The last thing I want to say about that, as far as advice, is a lot of people who watch this tend to watch and read reviews. And I think it's important that when you're consuming all of this media, it's important to pay more attention to how reviewers describe the performance of the product versus their personal opinion. Like, I love it, I hate it. None of that really should matter to you because you're not that person. You're not in the room. You don't have their experience. You don't have their ears, listen to music the same way. Their personal opinion of love and hate doesn't matter unless you just so happen to have owned a lot of the same products that they've reviewed. You agree with them. You feel the same way as they do. Then great, their opinion's useful to you. But for most of you, don't pay attention to that. And I think a great example of this, and I can't remember the model name or model number, is a Bowers and Wilkins bookshelf speaker from like 2 or 3 years ago. There were reviewers who loved it. Some of them even gave it Product of the Year award. And then other reviewers trashed it. Too bright, unlistenable, and somewhere in the middle. But you know what? They all said the same thing about the product. It's just their emotional reaction was completely different. So, and I saw a lot of people get tripped up about that. And instead of trying to find who's right and who's wrong, no, that doesn't matter. Just pay attention to what they're saying about the sound. And what you look for is kind of a common thread, and that can help you to make a blind buy so you know what you're getting into. But that's my advice as far as maximizing investments. I think the last topic that I want to cover here is point of diminishing returns. Personally speaking, where do you think that's at? Like for you?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it briefly, but like budget products have gone so good that that point of diminishing return really starts around $500 for me. Like I said, yeah, if you spend double or more, yeah, it's clearly better, but at what cost,
Yeah.
right? Like when you spend double, let's say from 500 to $1,000 speaker, you're kind of going sidetracking, right? You're like kind of, it's just different. It's not necessarily better, right? So and then you spend 5 times more. Yeah, it's clearly better, but is it 5 times better? So again, it's about kind of justifying and seeing how much of a difference you want. Do you want that extra 10 FPS or 15 50 FPS upgrade? And are you willing to pay 5 times the price for that jump?
Yeah, I mean, you see that, like, I'm into cars. How much money are you willing to spend to increase your 0 to 60 time or your quarter mile time? It can be crazy, but to some people, it's absolutely worth it. I think for the average person who supports this industry, who actually buys hi-fi, I would agree with you. $500, you can get Triangle Bro 3, you can get the ELAC debut reference, you can get an Iota VX SA3, put it together, and you got a musically satisfying system that I think most average people would be more than happy with, especially people who are coming from like sound bars or something like that. That's going to be a phenomenal system. Now, do you spend more money? Do you get better? Absolutely. But can you justify it? Well, that's going to be more down to your personal financial position, how passionate you are about sound, whether or not you personally feel like the differences are worth it. For me, I think 2,500 is where I personally put that line, just because, as I said earlier, once I go beyond that price point, I notice this is when you need skill. This is when you need true experience and knowledge in order to really start to maximize your investment. Whereas beneath that price point, you can get away with just buying something and shoving it against the wall, and then there you go. With exceptions, but buying.
Yeah, again, I think I would say experience still matters even at lower price points. But I think one of the things that we're kind of alluding to is the fact that under a certain price point, let's say around $2,500 price point, you're kind of getting like an all-rounder speaker.
Yep.
Like the manufacturers and companies prioritize on getting a all-rounder speaker instead of a specialized that's specific kind of things. And as you kind of go to the higher end market, I'll give an example is like the Ross Ferrant, so Toggle 2s I reviewed, right? It's like a warm speaker, but like fantastic imaging and sound staging capability. But it's not the deepest extending bass. It's a slim tower, right? It's a $10,000 speaker, yet it's phenomenal in certain areas. And it's not going to be. It's going to be it's a question like if I expected deep, thunderous bass from a slim tower, well, that's not exactly the speaker for that, right?
Yeah, it's quality over quantity for sure.
Yeah, so you got to know what you like, especially if you're planning to spend and drop a lot of money in hi-fi, and you got to know what to do with it as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're on the same page with that one. So I think we've summarized this topic pretty well. Is there anything else that you have to add?
Yeah, I have one more thing to add.
Okay.
In regards to like how you said, listen to what the reviewer is saying, not their excitement. And I agree with that. What is great to me may not be, the same kind of priority or good for someone else. Like if I'm raving about warranty services and they don't care about warranty and they're planning to buy used, that may be meaningless to them.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. But on top of that, especially when it comes to sound quality, like listen to what they're describing instead of the excitement. But also consider what they're pairing the speaker with, because matching matters, like synergy matters a lot. Like I have had many times where I walk into a room and it's like a $500 speaker, and that $500 speaker is run by like a pretty good $3,000 amplifier, and it's like, wow, I didn't hear that $500 speaker like that before. Like, holy crap, that's a really good match, right?
Yeah.
And that no longer sounds like a $500 speaker to me. It sounds like a much more expensive speaker.
Yeah.
So listen to what the reviewer is matching, right? So I've had times where someone says, oh, this other reviewer said that this pairing was the speakers were bright or too warm or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you're saying here that it's neutral and balanced or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are the reviewers saying different? And a lot of the times reviewers are saying the same thing,
It's a
except
valid question from the
right.
audience's
But
point of view.
but
Yeah.
but a lot of times I go back to those reviewers that they're talking about and see what they're matching with, and then I kind of get it, right?
Yeah.
So think about the room, think about the equipment the reviewer has and what they're pairing with, and that may give you a good answer as to which is a good pairing and which is a bad pairing, right? Because again, reviewers, us don't have all the equipment on the market available to us.
We don't have access to every room type and
Yeah,
every.
I've had times here where I literally this happened. You know, I've had speakers in here that I just couldn't find a good matching for within what I had, so I had to get new stuff in. Or sometimes I just said the speaker doesn't sound good with anything I have. You know, so you know, too bad, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like for example, Lee Song, right? That
Yeah.
maybe I would have liked that speaker with like 2 monoblocks and some other exotic kind of
Your old NAT.
amplifiers. Right, you know, but with what I have, with what I had, which is what I presented, it didn't
Mm-hmm.
work. So at least the viewers know what it didn't work with, right? So and why I disliked it. So
Sure.
yeah, listen to that. You know, so again, yeah, that'll be my kind of plus one on your kind of point there, Sean.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we've covered the base, man. And I think the overarching point, for me at least, is going to be, so what should you expect when you spend more money? At the very less, or at the very least, you should expect to get more stuff in terms of material costs, whether it's a speaker, an amplifier, heck, even a DAC or a streamer. Usually you should get more hardware, more stuff. Does it translate to better sound? I mean, sometimes yes, sometimes not really. And does paying more guarantee better sound quality? If you know what you're doing, the answer can oftentimes be yes, but if you don't, it can oftentimes be no. So there's a lot of, variance here in the subject. But I think our overall point is, if you know what you're doing, then spending more money, you should expect and be able to achieve better sound. And if you don't know what you're doing, you might be disappointed, and that's okay. What that means is just experience more. And as time goes on and you learn more about this stuff, then it's going to start to make a little bit more sense for you. And there's going to be more of a payoff at the end. So that's my summary. What about yours?
Yeah, no, pretty much the same. I think that the priority list will become really handy if you write down all the priorities, and go from there. You're gonna have a more of a focused list of things that you want to audition, try out, instead of having this broad kind of stroke. Yeah, it's very overwhelming sometimes, right? You have all these brands, all these speakers, all these amplifiers. Which one? Often the question is, which one's the best? Well, if you narrow down your priorities, then you know what's best for you within that kind of
or at least get a top three to start.
Exactly, top three to start with, audition, and then once you kind of hone in on what fits with your taste and your budget and your priorities, then that list becomes smaller and smaller, and then you're gonna be able to find something that you really, really like, as I did with the AGD audience. And so that's my advice, and I would do that listing, priority listing for everything you buy, like speakers, amplifiers. What's important in a speaker for you? Priority 1 to 10, right? And I think that's kind of a more organized way of doing it, and that way I think you can get a lot of value to where you feel like you got what your money worth was, right? So I think that's probably my top advice when you're searching. And that's personally what I do. So
I think that's great advice. Well, man, I think this pretty much concludes our very first episode of the One Bit Podcast. Hopefully people took something away from it, or at the very least found it entertaining. I think the best news is that I still have time to run to Starbucks after this.
Awesome.
Victory.
Starbucks. Anyway, so I will also say I'll invite the viewers to comment down below and tell us what you think. Right? Tell us what you think the diminishing return is, the point is, products that you bought that you thought was great bang for your buck, what were your priorities? And yeah, I'm interested. I'm actually interested in a lot of people's like priority list. Because for me, like sound is always at the top, right? Like,
same. Sound is absolutely.
I'm curious about what you guys think. So comment down below with your priorities and
also what you value. Yeah, the priorities. Like I'd be curious. Like,
yeah.
Does brand matter to you? Does measurements, like what matters to you? So yeah, cool.
So that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. And this was the Wondered Podcast. See you on the next episode.
Peace.
We're driving cars on a Mars tonight.